Hello everyone, the Liberty Game Boy here. Today I'm going to respond to a video by Arcion called the Libertarian Buzzword, Statist. Without further ado, let's begin.
Hey Statists, we've got some questions for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a bit of a question to ask you. At what point does that statement that you just heard sound suspiciously like this?
Donald Trump, go away! Racist, sexist, anti-gay! Donald Trump, go away! Racist, sexist, anti-gay! We reject the president-elect! We reject the president-elect!
To me, it doesn't even sound remotely similar. It sounds to me like you're trying to imply that the word statist is a negative term along with racist, sexist, and anti-gay.
Hello everyone, my name is Arcion and I am the Angel of Objectivism. Obviously, this intro might have probably triggered a few of you, and I'm guessing you're probably libertarians if that's the case.
I'm less triggered and more confused, really. Why would you think that the word statist is a negative term? Maybe you'll explain it at some point?
I would like to ask you a question. If I were to call you a sexist, what would you think it would mean? Do you think that means I love sex? Do you think that means I'm a sex enthusiast? Well, we all know what it really means, and it's not exactly a compliment. Now, perhaps the term statist isn't quite the same term, exactly. But can we just be honest for a second and really just acknowledge the fact that whenever someone uses the word status, it's never a positive?
Never a positive? But what if that describes you? Wouldn't you want people to acknowledge you as a statist in that case?
Think about this. When someone wants to really make a valuable, truly understandable argument, do you think it's a good idea to first poison the well by immediately giving them a label that puts you beneath them?
Well, no. If someone is making an argument and using a label that puts you beneath them, that is an example of poisoning the well. But I don't think that, for example, me describing you as a statist puts you below me.
Think about it. By using the word statist, I don't consider myself to be a libertarian. I have some libertarian leanings, but I am a conservative at the end of the day. I know myself well enough to call myself conservative. With that being said, why is it that libertarians get a bit of a free pass when it comes to what they label people? I understand that they seem to be the least objectionable group there is, but isn't it really just poisoning the well to immediately compare someone to someone who loves the states?
Well, yes, but can you give an example of a libertarian doing that?
Now, many libertarians will use the classic argument, well, statist doesn't mean you are a state-loving person, that you just love the state, you want as much big government as possible.
What you've given us here, Arcion, is an oversimplification of the word statist. A statist is someone who believes that the state is legitimate to a certain degree, whether that means you want the state to control everything or only the education industry, for example. The term statist doesn't in any way imply that someone is a state-loving person or wants as much big government as possible. Distorting the meaning of the word statist in this way is dishonest.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. What if I call you a racist? And that doesn't mean you hate other people of other races. What if that just means you're a white nationalist who likes the fact that you're white? Or a black nationalist? You have no problem with other people of other races. You just really, really love it. Do you think the word racist is going to be interpreted by people who have never heard that term as meaning that? Are we honestly going to say that?
So because sexist doesn't mean loving sex, and racist doesn't mean loving other races, statist means loving the state? I don't follow.
It's at this point that I would like to ask libertarians this. Why is it that you get this double standard that conservatives would never get? I guarantee you, if Julie Borowski calls me a statist, nothing's going to happen to her. If Lauren Southern does this, nothing's going to happen to her. Gavin McInnes, nothing. That guy T, nothing.
Yeah, and that should tell you something, Arcion. People typically don't view the word statist as an insult or a negative term like you seem to do. Calling a non-statist a statist is less insulting than calling a non-racist a racist, maybe even way less insulting.
If I were to dare even say that guy T is a pot-smoking hippie, everyone would laugh at me, and then they would give all sorts of reasons why I'm a moron.
You mean to tell me that none of them would ignore you? You mean to tell me that none of them would agree with you?
So, this little presentation is going to be a little bit about the dichotomy of the word. Because I think we all know at the end of the day, it's a poisoning tactic.
Based on your earlier oversimplification of the word.
And you know what? You say whatever you want. I will not break the non-aggression principle, which I believe in to a certain degree, in order to force you and compel you to stop using this word. However, what I will do is I will look at you with less respect, because I think we both know at the end of the day that this word really isn't an argument. It's basically like saying, hey, Trump's a Nazi. Oh, hey, you're a Nazi. You love Hitler. You love the states. You must love that big state. You must worship Bernie Sanders in all his glory. Or maybe you worship Jeb Bush or some other Bush.
It's not at all like saying that. Maybe if the word meant someone who loved the state like you claimed it does. But again, that's an oversimplification of the word. The definition I gave earlier recognizes the fact that people are different and want varying degrees of governmental control in their own lives. Your oversimplification does not, and assumes that people want as much big government as possible, which is not the case.
So let's begin to get to it, shall we?
Government has slaughtered 250 million of its own people in acts of democide. How can you trust such?
While he is right that some governments have absolutely slaughtered people for no good reason whatsoever, I need to explain this to anarchists because I just need them to understand a fundamental fact about governments. Okay, you guys ready? You ready? You ready? This is going to blow your mind. You're never going to believe this. It's fantastic. I can't guarantee you. You're never going to believe this. Government is not a monolith!
Because yelling at your opposition is a respectable way to get your point across, especially if the point in question is something your opposition already knows.
Let me say that again. Government is not a monolith. We have local, state, and federal governments. We have the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. There are reasons for that. Anarchy doesn't work, by the way. I'm going to explain that a little later.
Well, most of the time we don't even get to try, which is a problem for our current statist system that we live under. Also, it's easier for anarchism to work on a small scale rather than a large scale. There are many challenges that come with trying to make anarchism nationwide. Also, you seem to be ignoring times where it has worked in the past but wasn't a big success, such as revolutionary Catalonia, for example. And what do you mean by work? Because when used in that context, it could be vague and can mean different things to different people.
You do realize that making something illegal won't make it go away.
What's up, Julie? Good to see you again. Okay, so this is a common argument that's used against pretty much everyone who's not a libertarian. Now, I'd like to ask you something. Am I really a statist for saying this? Just because the black market exists doesn't mean you shouldn't make laws against things.
Just because you want to keep laws in place in the presence of black markets for illegal acts, it doesn't make you a sadist.
Is that reasonable? Yeah, you do realize that there probably is a black market for things such as serial killing or for hitmanning, literally for hiring people to kill others, assassins. There's probably also a market for terrorism. In fact, that is an illegal market. Now, yes, I understand that to a certain degree, I understand where you're coming from, and I do get a little annoyed when people just say, just make it illegal and it'll go away. But do you really think that just because there's a black market that just instantly makes people like me who say we should still outlaw it a statist? Am I really a statist for saying that despite the fact that it's illegal, and there's also a black market for it, that we should still maybe make it illegal? Just because there's a black market doesn't mean that you need to make it legal.
I agree when it comes to crimes with a victim, such as murder, theft, and rape. I disagree when it comes to crimes without a victim, such as drug use, prostitution, and gambling. Drug use, prostitution, and gambling are things that shouldn't even be considered crimes because they're all activities that don't involve harming others. Making something that doesn't cause harm to another person illegal is how you tarnish personal freedom and infringe upon the liberties of peaceful people. It's also how you keep a black market for those things.
Why? It doesn't make any sense. It's like in Milwaukee when they stopped chasing people who were speeding. Okay, people are going to do that anyway, even if it wasn't illegal, but you basically let more people get hurt because there was no consequences. How does that make me a statist for daring to say that? How does that do that, Julie?
It's the Liberty Game Boy, not Julie. Joking aside, once again, it doesn't make you a statist.
Guns, drugs, the black market.
Yeah, Julie, I kind of already know what you're going to say. I don't really need a rehash, okay?
Here's some of the money government wasted. The government spent $1.4 million on an app that just simply points left and right for the TSA. That should have been done for way cheaper. Oh, that's not crazy enough for you? How about this? The government wasted $1.4 trillion on a jet that doesn't even work. That's enough to buy every homeless person in the United States a mansion. A $600,000 home. Oh, that's not crazy enough for you. The government lost $6 trillion.
Oh, Mr. Dapperton. Okay. You know what? I know it's going to be hard to talk to you
It can't be that hard if you're talking to him right now.
because you're an anarchist. I'm not even a minarchist libertarian. I'm a minarchist conservative. So right from the get-go, we're going to be on opposite ends of the political spectrum. It's just inevitable. But, okay. The word statist is clearly a word, and I think that we can all just be honest this time. It's a word you use when you want to describe someone who wants as much big government as possible. A state lover, I guess you could say. Essentially a socialist, a collectivist. When you really, really get down to it.
The definition I gave earlier doesn't imply that a statist is either one of those things.
Don't lie to me and say that it's for people who are just non-libertarians.
Do you have any examples of libertarians saying that?
If you want to have a word for non-libertarians, use that word. Non-libertarian. Why not? Okay? And yeah, I've heard Lauren Southern use this. I've heard Julie Borowski use this. I've heard that guy T use this. I've heard plenty of people use the word statist. So don't lie and pretend and that it's not something for all non-libertarians. Am I really a huge government person for daring to say that we need a certain amount of governments? You want to know why I'm not a libertarian? Why I know I can never be considered one? It's because I do feel that because governments exist and it needs to exist, in my opinion, rather have you, that because of that, what? That I simply dare say that the government will need to go ahead and use force when people don't want to pay taxes.
Well, I don't. Forcing people to give up debt they never agreed to is immoral. It should also be pointed out that some libertarians are in favor of what's called voluntary taxation, where people would pick what government services they want and are willing to pay for on a voluntary basis.
I don't like heavy taxes. I like small taxes personally. I think we should all get a receipt at the end of the year because I think we should know where the hell our money goes, especially since the government wastes it nonstop. With that being said, am I really a statist for saying that I know people shouldn't just be allowed to obey whichever laws they feel like, depending on the day that it is? That the government should be allowed to use force and say, okay, these are the laws. We can't just let you decide which ones you decide to go ahead and obey and which ones you don't. Because we have a government and it protects us universally. It's supposed to protect us from outside attacks. It's supposed to protect our rights, our constitutional rights. With that being said, considering you could always get a response from the fire department or from the police department or from any other government service, do you really think that your solution, if you can't get rid of governments...
You're confusing libertarians and anarchists here. Anarchists are the ones that want to get rid of government, not libertarians.
Would be to go ahead and just have people opt out of government services altogether if they really don't want them and they want to pay taxes.
If some people don't want government services, it most likely means that they're confident that the private sector can handle them better than government can. And private sector versions of the police, fire department, roads, etc. do exist and are often better maintained than government versions of these things. But not all libertarians propose to have people opt out of government services, hence the concept of voluntary taxation as I explained earlier. I personally don't believe that having people opt out of government services is that practical. About taxes, it makes sense why some people don't want to pay for them, because it's paid for through force.
Yeah, that's the reason why I can't be a libertarian. But
you can't be a libertarian because of a false assumption that libertarians want to get rid of government, and that the only solution we propose if we can't get rid of a government is to have people opt out of government services? Interesting. Now it's about this point in his video where he plays more clips like the ones at the beginning, trying to compare the word statist to more negative terms like white supremacist, shifty Jew, and cuck, and asks once again if they sound comparable. I'm going to cut those out. If in case you do want to see those clips, I put the link to his video in the description.
Do any of those statements at all sound similar to each other? Do they? Because in my opinion, they certainly do. And I think we both know, and do not lie to me, all you libertarians out there, Do not lie to me and tell me that the word statist isn't an insult or a way of muddying the waters. I think we both know that that's exactly what it is.
You think that the word statist is a poisoning tactic because of the oversimplification that you gave earlier. It's not a word used to muddy the waters like you claim it does, and you've done absolutely nothing to show that it is. You just claim that it is and assume that when people like me use the word, we mean people who love the state and who want as much big government as possible. I have no idea whether this dishonesty was intentional or not, but the fact that you say it with so much confidence near the end of your video tells me that it was intentional.
It's a shaming tactic, and it's designed and used specifically to make people like myself, who are not considering themselves libertarian, to make ourselves feel like we love the states.
If you feel this way when someone uses it, maybe ask them what they mean when they used it, and don't just assume that they're using it to mean that. Listen man, if you have the time to look up the video clips that you've put in your video, you have the time to look up the definition of status and know what it means and not make yourself look like a tool and assume that you know what it means without looking it up. You've done nothing to explain how the word statist means someone who loves the state and who wants as much big government as possible. You just claim it does and say that it's a poisoning tactic and a shaming tactic, and you even had the audacity to say a little later in your video it's a word used to avoid a real conversation without explaining any of it. I apologize if I came across as mean near the end here, but when Arcion oversimplifies the meaning of statist without looking it up and claims that it's a poisoning tactic, it just made me a bit mad. The word statist isn't insulting in and of itself. It's the intent of the person using it that can be an insult. And that concludes my response. I have another video that I want to respond to, but that'll have to wait until later. If you guys have any video suggestions, put them in the comment section and I will try to do them as soon as possible. I have been the Liberty Game Boy, and I will see you guys later. Take care.